Hi there, I'm Dr. Victoria Mattingly, and this is Better Humans at Work. On this week's episode, I'm joined by the amazing Nicole Kenney, where we talk about how we can leverage the power of storytelling and communications to advance social justice goals. Nicole is the founder and executive officer at It Starts With Me, a multicultural communications firm that powers mission-driven companies with creative strategies, campaigns, and experiences to create a more equitable society. Nicole has over 15 years of experience innovating at the intersection of policy, communications, and programming to help advance socio-economic justice. At It Starts With Me, Nicole uses innovative strategies, creative storytelling, virtual thematic programming to support fresh startups to establish brands in achieving big social goals, moving critical conversations forward, and expanding their impact to advance racial, gender, and economic equity locally, nationally, and around the globe. Nicole recently won $10,000 as part of the Well City Challenge to pilot her idea, Hey Auntie. Hey Auntie is a professional development platform that empowers Black women with multi-generational connections and community to help them rise and thrive in their work lives. Her work continues with a 3-month accelerator to help further develop Hey Auntie and have the chance to receive an additional $50,000 in seed investments. Congratulations, Nicole. I'm so excited to follow along on your journey. Without further ado, here's Nicole and I talking about the power of storytelling and communications for doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Nicole. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Victoria?
I'm good. I'm so excited for you, and I just want to share a big congrats on your recent award to grow your startup idea, Hey Auntie.
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so excited for you to share what this idea is and this startup and how it might serve certain populations to improve the human experience of work. So tell us about Hey Auntie, what it's all about, and what you're going to be doing with this startup.
Right. So just a little bit of context. So Hey Auntie really came about as part of what's called the Well City Challenge. And so, I'm based in Philadelphia. And so the Greater Economy League, or the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia, and Independence Blue Cross partnered to really respond to a report which found that millennial health was actually not as well as they suspected. Typically, when we are, later generations, we're typically, because of health systems, supposed to be doing better. But what they found is that we were actually doing worse than the generation right before us. And they looked at 10 health outcomes in particular. And what they found is that out of those 10, 6 of them were behavioral. Okay. What that means is that the mind and the emotions are actually impacting our physical health. And at the top of that list was depression and anxiety, right? And I should note, this was actually before COVID. So as we've probably heard, this means that probably millennial health is actually even doing maybe somewhat worse since COVID. But so because of this, they really sent out a call for community-based solutions. They were like, look, we need to hear from the community. How can we address millennial health? Specifically in one of these 10 core areas. Now, me personally, I've been very candid about my own experiences with anxiety, right? And it started for me in academia, but really more so in the workplace is when I really noticed me experiencing it more frequently. And so I felt like I had something really personal to bring to this competition, but even more importantly, because of my work, right? A lot of my work around It Starts With Me really has to do with addressing racial and economic equity and gender equity, but also health and wellness. So always looking at how health and wellness can drive these two types of equity forward. And what I found in my own lived experience and in my work experience is that women had very unique experiences in the workplace, and Black women, because of both race and gender, had even more unique experiences in the workplace. And so what Hey Auntie was an opportunity to do is something that was a real solution for me back in my own journey of really really connecting with other women who are more seasoned, whether it be in career, whether it be just in life, to give me some strategies and solutions and laughs, because you have to laugh. Life can be hard. So you need to make sure you can laugh, and really how to navigate a lot of these challenges. And that for me, the first part of that really took away the shame and the stigma, because when you're going through challenges, even sometimes at work, it can seem very isolating. And you can feel very much like this is only your experience. And so just by being in community and talking to other women, I realized these experiences I was having was not unique, and that there were strategies to navigate it, and that I could in fact rise and thrive in my work life. So that was the idea. And I attached technology to it as a platform, because what we all probably know too is technology is the future of work. And especially when we talk about work for women and work for Black and brown folks and other communities of color, we have to be constantly thinking about how we're going to reskill and retool to continue to compete in this global economy. And so I came up with this platform to build these connections using artificial intelligence and other forms of technology and data to really create a customized experience for Black professional women. And when I say professional women, I don't mean just confined in the four walls. I mean women who have just professional ambitions and need support, and to really use technology to help create stronger connections, more so like as a facilitator, so that they can continue to get guidance and support as they journey along in their lives. So yeah, so I just pitched. There was over 100 applicants. It was then narrowed down to 15. We were put in an incubator for a month and then had to repitch again. And I was one of the grand prize winners. So I won $10,000. And now, yeah, I'm excited. So I'm going into an accelerator starting in April. And I'll be in the accelerator for 3 months, really now doing a deep dive, workshopping this idea, coming up with a pilot. And then at the end of, it's funny, July 7th, which is actually my birthday, will be the community showcase. And so now what I'm doing is competing to win $50,000 in seed investment to further Hey Auntie forward. So this was created to really improve Black women's experience in the workplace, because there's so much ingenuity and innovation and creativity that we have. But when you're not addressing the barriers that are created due to racism and sexism, it not only is harmful to your emotional and mental health, but oftentimes now you're going to leave and opt out. So that innovation and ingenuity is never going to be realized. And a lot of the solutions that we need may never be heard and never be kind of, executed on. So that's the gist of it.
Oh my goodness, I love it so much. 2 follow-up questions.
Sure.
First off, you mentioned this intersection of both race and gender. Can you talk a little bit about how intersectionality guides your work and is helping you build this amazing solution to help serve this population?
Right. So intersectionality is key. And part of that is just understanding that, we're full faceted human. There's so many dimensions that create who we are, right? And specifically, I'll talk for Black women. Oftentimes when we're talking about issues, it's only issues maybe as a woman. And when you're just talking about a woman, as we know, all women, we live in a world that is not equal and not fair. But there are challenges and experiences that just being a white woman, you may not have, that I may have, right? But also too, in Black spaces, right? Because, sexism is real. And so there might be challenges that, Black men, and I've seen this in my diverse and inclusion work, where they might say, everything's fine, but then a Black woman is having a very different lived experience in the workplace. And so really acknowledging that those two identities and more, there could be more identities that contribute to that, right? But that are going to have unique impacts on the way that we as Black women, but just people kind of live and experience life and experience work. And you have to really be able to acknowledge that when creating the solution. Because if you don't, what you'll have is like these blanket solutions, which typically are always only it's kind of like, I always think like that one size fits all shirt, when it doesn't fit all.
No, it doesn't fit one.
There's, it doesn't fit all. And so it's just like, and so why don't we have more tailored and targeted approaches? I tell people the more unique the barriers, the more unique the problems, the more unique the solutions. And I feel like we see that, especially for me as a communications professional in marketing, right? You know, as a smart marketer knows not to talk to you like they would talk to someone else. They're going to take all that data about you because they want to make the sale to you, right? So that's the way I think about D&I work, right? If we are intentional about creating a workplace where everyone can thrive, it's not the matter of, especially when we think about equity, like you get more, you get less, but it's like, hey, we want everyone to do well. So if we think about it like a marketer, what works for you may not work for you, and that's okay.
Yes.
That's okay. And once I think we're able to operate in that way, then you'll be able to find that everyone has the same opportunity to thrive, both in their work and outside of the workplace.
Oh, thank you for that. I totally agree. Intersectionality is such an important lens that diversity, equity, inclusion practitioners must have to do this work effectively. So thank you for that explanation and example. And then my second question about Hey Auntie, before we get into your other company, it starts with me, is why Hey Auntie? What does that phrasing mean? What significance to, like, why did you choose that name?
Yeah, so I really appreciate you asking that question as well. So Auntie is a term of, well, first, we all know what an aunt is, right? She's your mother's sister. But specifically in the Black community, you know, Auntie is a term of endearment, you know, in Black, and I have to be truthfully and honestly, in Brown communities as well, you know, aunties are the women in your lives who also take you under their wing, right? They're the ones, I call them their cheerleader every woman needs. And the truth talker every woman needs, right? You know that they're coming to you with love, but they're there really to give you guidance, and they're really there to give you support. So the idea really just came from my own actual auntie, who Dr. Deborah Darlene Roebuck, who spent over 40 years of her life. She's a career professional serving women and girls. That's just what she's always done. And so she's always had a heart to serve women and girls. And so, and she's just also fantastic. So I would always go to her for advice, still do. So you will hear me, if you're ever around me, say, hey, Auntie, you know, because I'm asking a question. And then even my friends, you know, when my friends will come around, they would also say, hey, Auntie, you know, and then I just use that term more loosely. You know, I really believe in multi-generational sisterhood. So there are a lot of women in my life who are over 60, 70, and 80, who I also look to as aunties. And these are women who have taken me under their wing, who want to invest in me. And I should also say it's also a two-way communication channel. So it's not just about, you know, these more seasoned women just pouring into me. It's also about me also pouring into them. So the idea of too came with COVID, right? And we had many of our, you know, elderly population who might not have been able to get groceries or may have felt isolated. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, if I can begin to create this kind of multi-directional mentoring system, then I'll also create a group of women who are also caring and concerned about the needs of women who are also older, and might also need support as well. So that's really it's a loving term, and also too, because I want this platform to be a safe space, I wanted to use that term as well to convey warmth, to convey community, and really to convey love. I tell people I drive a compassionate, love-centered business. Yes. And it's really important that, because as human beings, you know, we all need love. And I think you can't really help and support people until they know that they are loved and that you're coming with compassion, and you know, you don't mean any harm, you know, you're just there to help.
Oh, I love that. Two quick follow-up points. So one,
sure.
The way that you talk about the two-way street, right? It's not just mentor to mentee, but the other way around, whatever words we use. And I talk about that language a lot in the work I do with allyship. And allyship it's an ongoing partnership and relationship. Right. And even in the same conversation, those roles of ally and partner can flip, you know, and so right. It needs to be a two-way street, an ongoing conversation, partnership. I love that. Yep. You mentioned earlier, and obviously I love your marketing background, how you've leveraged and really used marketing and communications in your work as a DEI practitioner. So can you share a little bit about how your other company, your current company, It Starts With Me, is at that intersection of communication and DE&I. And so like, and more broadly, like what does communications have to do with fostering a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive organization?
So one word, everything. But yeah, so I have a really interesting background. So I have a public policy, communications, and programmatic background. So I say I sit at the intersection of all those things to really advance equity. And that's actually been a benefit to me. So, I've spent my graduate career and then working at the NACP was a more public policy at first. So what that means is more like high level approaches, looking at systems, looking at process, and really looking at research, right? Working on corporate report cards and things like that. All that was really important for me to understand how to approach DEI just from like a systems level. But when I started getting communications, which was actually something I didn't expect, it was because I was starting to be tasked more with communicating these policies, because there can be a real disconnect between the policies and processes that you create and how it is received by people. And so I appreciate really being pushed in that direction of understanding. And this is something that I actually hear a lot in my DI work, you may too, is this difference between intent and impact,
Yes.
right? And so it's, especially when it comes to creating safe spaces, is this idea that, intent is good enough and things like that, or even, but it's not. But as a communications person, what it's taught me is that I have to be very, very intentional about the impact. That's what drives me, is the impact. And in order to be concerned about the impact, you have to be very people-centered. You have to center whomever the target audience is of whatever it is that you're creating or you're trying to communicate. So that has been very helpful. And then I tell people my happy place is programs. And that for me is really kind of walking out the policy and the communication. So now how do you show up? How are you actually doing this in the day-to-day? And so I really used all of that to start my business. It starts with me. And basically using that storytelling piece, everything from the branding and the data to, actually like writing. It's interesting for me, a lot of my DEI work has been like editing speeches, right? So talking, or editing emails, working with, founders who are very sincere and intentional about wanting to kind of maybe move in a different direction or create a safer space. But the intention's not going to be conveyed, the impact of the words being used, I think would kind of not convey the impact, if the intention, if that makes sense. I know I'm using those words back and forth. And so really, even when I'm working with leaders in this space, having to really encourage them to think more about just the words you're using, you know what I mean? And the words that would create more safety to the groups that you are talking about, and really kind of taking yourself out of it. And that's hard sometimes, taking yourself out of it and not being like, well, this is what I meant, but like, really thinking about, what is it that your audience wants to hear. So that really, creating my own firm, my communications firm, really just guides me in all my work. I tell people I'm very people-centered. And so oftentimes when I'm doing my projects, they're very customized to whomever I'm serving. And at the front end, sometimes people think that can be a lot more work, but because I'm always impact driven, I find that I'm way more successful once I'm able to really listen to what the needs and the concerns are of the client and the leaders too, and then kind of being responsive in that way. So I hope I answered I answered your question. Yeah,
you did. And one quick call out is the usage and the term centering, right? And so to try to ensure that you have impact over intention, making sure that the message is being centered around the group or the people or the person that is what the intention is supposed to be, to have that impact. The target of that impact is the
right.
centered. The target of that impact is being centered, and to use communications as a key tool, marketing as a key tool of doing that. Speaking of key tools that you use, and something I'm always encouraging my clients to do is collect stories, use
Yeah.
storytelling. And so how do you, Nicole, recommend that people use creative storytelling to advance these broader goals of social justice, especially in the context of the workplace?
Right. So I'm glad you mentioned that. One point I wanted to say about communications is mostly listening. To the storytelling piece and to the centering piece, the first thing is I would even go before that. One of the most popular presentations I'm doing right now is on self-awareness, actually.
Mhm.
And it requires a high level of self-awareness just to listen. And I think sometimes we put out all these terms, and so that's the first strategy that I would say is just learning how to be an active listener. Learning that it is okay not to just be comfortable not being the center of attention, because to get stories is going to require safety. Because what I've seen in my DEI work, especially for underrepresented groups, is like, oh, just tell me your story, tell me your story. And the trust has been broken. So we can't even get to a story place until that trust has been repaired. So the first thing that I would say is really building, and this is something we can all can do. According to the research, only like 8 to 10 of us are self-aware. So this is something, I'm constantly working, I always encourage folks to work on. But if you're really sincere about like advancing social justice issues in your workplace and in your community, really focus on building that self-awareness. And that really first just starts with listening. The second piece of that, I would say, to your point about stories, get a survey of what is most important to your workplace, because every workplace is different. And sometimes I think it's great that kind of there are like national or global issues that drive conversations, but you can use those as frameworks, starting points,
Mhm.
but have conversation with the team that you currently have, to see kind of like what type of experiences, assuming they want to share, because I want to share that as well, not to have an entitlement to people's stories, because I see that as well, but assuming that you've created that safe space, giving people the different platforms to share. And you can do that in various ways. One of the most compelling ways is actually video. If people feel comfortable on video, and it doesn't have to be an hour, it could be as short as, if you're on IG, a couple of Instagram live feeds. That's it. You could do, like, I'm a thematic person, so
Mhm.
let's say you just want to do something for the month, and you want to kind of break out little pieces and share it on the same day every month. I would suggest, and that will kind of go to my third piece, which is strategy. It's super important. So I would say self-awareness, then surveying to kind of get a sense of the stories that you want to share, and then strategy. And I'm saying this especially as a communications professional, and with the DEI work, because what people want to know is that this is not just something that's happening because it's fun or it's in vogue right now. And one of the best ways to convey intentionality is through strategy, right? Don't feel compelled, just to put something out there right now because everybody else is doing it. You'll build more trust if you can go back to these communities, especially if you're asking for stories, and say, listen, this is how we're storyboarded the next 3 months. These are how we want to share these stories. That's going to convey, because there is some cynicism.
Yeah.
I want to be clear about that. There is some cynicism that this is something that workplaces are doing because there's like a extent, there's extra attention and focus on this. And so one of the best ways to suggest that this is going to be a priority is to make it a strategic priority, to really embed it, in the policies and the processes, of your communications, KPIs, all of those type of things. And it doesn't, I want to keep communicating. It doesn't have to be a lot. Like, it doesn't have to be a lot. What's more important is that it's just consistent.
Mhm.
So even if you say, I'm doing this for the next 3 months, great. Just knock that out. Just focus on that, and reassess. But I would say that seeing that level of intentionality and strategy is not only going to get you the content that you need right now, but it's going to engender that trust so that when you come back, or you go to maybe a different community you want to highlight, you can kind of show, examples of how you've handled this in the past. So, and that strategy is where everyone kind of is like, but can't we just, I'm like, no. Yeah, can't we just, no. And you want to, and I think and I'm sure you would agree too, in terms of outcomes. Because also where you have strategy, you have outcomes, and when you want to say, what's our share, how many people are reading, how many people are commenting, those are all questions you ask about strategic priorities. You want outcomes, and so I think having those, thinking about the self-awareness, surveying, and the strategy is really going, and then that's when you can play with the different tools, all that's the fun part, I think. But before getting to that point, I think you want to make sure you have those other things in order.
Absolutely. And, not only outcomes, but measurable outcomes, right?
Right. That's right.
Like what gets measured gets done, even if it is something. And I'm working with one client in particular now on their comm strategy, and we're doing like a monthly newsletter, and how should the structure be? How does that align with the other newsletters they have going on, and make sure it fits into that broader communication strategy, and having that consistency, and with the stories and the people that are being highlighted. And that just, it's so important. And, getting back to the strategy part, I say, even if it's just how many people are opening this newsletter.
That's right.
How many people from underrepresented groups are being featured in these newsletters compared to past newsletters? And visibility is one of our core objectives of our DEI strategy in this company. So like, how do we measure visibility? And comms is a great way of getting some of those KPIs. And so I love that. So just to recap, the 3 ways that you would recommend those out there watching to leverage the power of storytelling communications in their role, whether it's DEI or advancing broader social justice goals: self-awareness, survey, and strategy.
That's right.
I love it. I love it. Nicole, you are amazing. I am so excited that we were connected, that you are just blowing up with, Hey Auntie and Starts With Me. How can people follow along on your journey and support you? How should people reach out and stay in touch?
Yep. So you can follow me on my website, which is www.itstartswithmellc.com. I'm on LinkedIn at Nicole Kenney, very easy to find, or you can follow me on Instagram, which is at Nicole, NicoleEbone. So it's Nicole Ebony. So it gets a little confusing there. Excellent. That's how you can find me. Yep.
We'll have all those links below. And I'm so grateful for you sharing your time and your wisdom and your expertise. Thank you for helping us all be better humans at work.